So we're ready to put the engine back in. We've got the car back on the ground. We've done everything I need to do underneath that I can remember. We've got the lower control arm bolts loose and the upper control arm bolts loose. The upper control arm where it bolts to the frame is tightened up. That's all going to be out of spec really bad. So we're going to have to definitely get this thing aligned. But I want to get weight on this front end before I tighten those two lower control arm bolt and upper control arm bolt on each side, because you want it at ride height when you do that. This thing's sitting way up because it doesn't have the engine in it. So we're going to wait to do that. We'll get the engine in it and we'll tighten those up, torque them down. Like I said, same on this side. So the next thing we've got to do is I'm going to roll this thing partly out of the shop to give myself some more room, and we'll marry the transmission back to the engine, and hopefully once we do that, we'll set this thing in. That's my goal today. I don't know if I'm going to get that far. It's taken way too long. I did quite a bit of cleaning in the shop. It's still a huge mess, but it's much better than it was. You know, put a bunch of tools up and, you know, yeah, just a mess. So it's still a mess, but it's less of a mess. So we're gonna see if we can get this thing in today. I don't know. Like I said, running out of time. So real quick here, if you didn't watch the Super Clean giveaway video, check out the link up above and go check out that video. Leave a comment on that video to be eligible to win some free Super Clean products. Of course, as soon as I backed the Lincoln out, it started pouring down rain, so the back half of the Lincoln is getting rained on. That's as far as I pushed it out, as far as I needed it out. So I'm gonna get this all bolted up, then we'll get the transmission bolted up, and we'll slide it in. Maybe the first time the Lincoln's ever been rained on since I finished it, and of course it's just the back half of it. I actually had the trunk open and I heard it start to sprinkle, so I went and closed it real quick. But I guess the back half will be, the dust will be washed off. So yeah, let's get this thing back together. All right, engine and transmission are bolted together. Starter's on it. I've got the separator plate on there, torque converter to flywheel, and of course the flywheel to the engine. All that's bolted up. I've got this little, the vacuum tube for the modulator is on. And so I think that's everything we need to put on here. Dipstick's on here with the new dipstick O-ring I did for a quick coat of paint on the dipstick. And yeah, our original starter, it was working fine, and can't think of anything else we need to do. This nut on here worked great. Just using a little impact and leveled this thing right up in a few seconds. So much better than that hand crank. So once we get it in, once we get the transmission over this, we'll dip it down and lower it in. So this will make it these levelers make it so much easier, because you don't have to lift it as high to clear, you know, a transmission that's pointed down, you know, because you normally would point it down to lower it in the car. You can level it and then tilt it down once the transmission is clear of the cross member or the core support. And this thing's kind of difficult because it lifts so high up. It is so high up in the air with no weight on the front suspension. So it's got super soft suspension, so this thing will drop probably 8 inches once the engine's in. So it's sitting up really high right now. Let me get this thing in. I guess I'll set up time lapse and y'all can watch us put it in. Well, big milestone, engine is in. So it's bolted in and the transmission cross member is in and bolted in. So all of that is secure. Now the next step, I think, because we had it partially out of the shop putting the engine in, and then once we got the hoist free, I jacked it up a little bit to get the transmission cross member bolted in. We set it in place on these. The transmission cross member kind of sits on the little tab. There's a little tab that sticks out from the frame, so you can slide that transmission cross member in and transmission will sit on it, you know, without actually bolting it in. And so we just slid all that in place, got the hoist out, jacked it up, bolted the cross member in. So it went fairly smoothly. The hoist did great, and the little engine leveler worked great. So awesome. Next time I would flip it around, because it did get kind of close. I think now we've got enough clearance. Before, you know, it was running into the hoist. I've got it lower, because when you get it tilted, that end of it right there gets close to the hoist right there when you've got it up high. And before, I couldn't swing that handle around because of that. Well, this time the end right there got real close to the firewall, and it was hard to adjust. Ended up putting a ratchet wrench on it and got it you know, leveled out how I needed it. With that hoist, with that leveler, what's nice is I had this engine sitting in here, and I just adjusted that thing and kicked the transmission up, you know, just by doing that. You know, we had the engine bolted in, and all I did was just adjust that and lifted the transmission up. So it worked out really well. Yeah, so I think next step, of course, to do the rest of the stuff underneath, like hook up speedometer, cable, transmission lines, none of that stuff is done yet. E-brake cable's undone because it's in the way. It runs through the cross member. I'm trying to think what else. Drive shaft, all that stuff, exhaust, all that stuff is not done, but we'll have to jack it back up to do that. I needed to roll the car back in the shop, and so I took it off jack stands. So I think we're gonna, before we jack it back up, I think we're gonna focus on the front accessories and try to knock that out, and then after that we'll probably jump over to underneath. I'm not really sure yet what I'm gonna do on exhaust. Let me show you something there. So here's the exhaust, and that's for my AFR meter. I think my plan is, so the muffler is trash on this thing, so I went ahead and cut the exhaust off at the muffler when I removed this and trying to take clamps off. Muffler's leaking, it needed to be replaced. But this is 2.5 inch exhaust, and that's just not gonna cut it. It's gonna be too restrictive. Ultimately, I'd love to put a dual exhaust on this thing. Probably dual 2.5 inch exhaust would be about right for this thing, but that's just not in the budget. So I'm thinking I'm gonna cut it right here, or right here, somewhere really close after it merges, and we're gonna upsize it with an adapter to 3 inch, so it'll have this little short piece of 2.5. But like I said, we're on a budget here, and we have blown through our budget rebuilding the engine, so we've got to do what we can here. And so we're going to upsize that to 3 inch. I'm going to run 3 inch all the way to the muffler, run a 3 inch muffler, and then I will see about either seeing if I can make a tailpipe, or I may just have a tailpipe made for it, a 3 inch tailpipe. So we'll see. I'm not sure yet. If I made one, I'd need to buy some pre-bent tubing and put it all together and make a tailpipe, or we just bite the bullet and have one made. So I'm not sure yet what route I'm going to go there. I have no idea what it would cost to get a tailpipe made, so I don't know. So back over to the car. So yeah, part of the reason of doing this is because I'm not sure on that exhaust. So I'll set up some time lapse on here so you can see what I'm doing, but we're just going to start bolting everything on. Alternator, we're going to start down low, alternator, then power steering pump. We'll hook up our fuel lines. We may wait to hook up the I haven't decided yet. I'm trying to decide, because we still need to crank this thing over. I don't have the plugs in it yet. The reason being is I want to, once we get everything hooked up and almost ready to start, I'm going to crank this thing over till we get oil pressure, make sure we can get oil pressure with the engine spinning over. And then while we're cranking it over, I'm also going to check the timing on it and make sure we're ballparked of where we need to be. And that way, first startup should go smoothly with no hiccups. The engine plate, I didn't use it. It's just on there blocking the hole to the intake so we don't drop anything on there. Works great for that. We're not going to use it for lifting. So let me get set up. I think I've covered everything you needed to know up to this point. And let's try to get all this front accessories done. right, we are at a stopping place for today. It's I kind of wanted to get the radiator in it. That's kind of where I wanted to be today. I did mess up. I think I did. So, I tore this thing down 10 months ago. So we're getting close to a year since I've pulled this engine out, give or take. About 10 months or so. And I kind of forgot about the transmission lines, and I feel like I pulled the engine and then pulled the transmission lines out. That probably makes sense. I don't think I pulled the transmission lines out before I pulled the engine out. So I had to snake those in there. It went better than I thought it would. So I got lucky there. That reminds me, I need to tighten these down. I left them loose on the transmission and on the radiator so I could go up underneath. And I put them on the transmission, left them loose, then came up here, tightened them on, put them on here, left them loose, and then went underneath and kind of checked how everything was and tweaked them a little bit because they got bent a little bit as I was trying to snake them. They go under the engine mount. It's between the cross member and the oil pan. They run over there, and there's a bracket that bolts to the bottom of the block that holds them in, and I got all that in. One thing I forgot that I'm debating whether I should do it or not. There's a heat shield on the driver's side. I ran across it in a box. It was actually the box that I had the engine mounts in, and I just forgot about it. And it guards that. It's a heat shield that goes on the engine mount. It bolts to the bolts that mount the engine mount to the block, and what it does is it guards the exhaust manifolds closer where it turns down on this side than it is on the other side, and so it guards. It's just a heat shield for that engine mount to keep the heat off the exhaust manifold, from getting on the engine mount. So we're reusing our old mounts, and I feel like they're probably not going to handle that extra heat well. So I'm going to have to deal with that and put it back on. And the bolts for that, they're, between the cross member under the manifold and between the cross member, in the engine. And I feel like if I'm going to go that route, I might try. I've got to put it on there. I just have to put it on there. So, because these engine mounts are unobtainium, and so we've got to give them the best shot of surviving. So I may try to get those bolts out as is, but I don't think that's going to go well. I just don't think I have enough room, and I think I'm going to have to remove the exhaust manifold, which, it's not a huge deal. It should come off fairly easily. I can get to the bolts, and it's not like we're working on something that has been together for 50 years. I just put the exhaust manifolds on, so it's not like we're dealing with stuck bolts or anything like that. So it should be relatively easy. I can get to all the bolts right there and just unbolt it, pull the manifold up out of the way, and then get those two bolts out. It'll be I don't think I would even need to support the engine, I think, because that would leave still one bolt in the engine mount, and I think that that should be fine. And then we would put that bracket on. That bracket goes between from what I recall, it goes between the bolt and the mount, so it's not like we have to sandwich it between the mount and the block. So yeah, I got to do that. Not too happy with my Hydro Boost and power steering lines. They're just not, the fitment is just not that great. I really had to tweak that one that's right there to make it clear. It was, it was right on the engine. It was laying against the engine, so I had to pull it back off, tweak it, put it back on, and I'm pretty happy with the mounting of it right now. This one was a different story. They put that bend way too far out from the pump, and so the stock one pretty much was the flare, the the nut or whatever, and then the bend. I mean, it was like immediately bent. And this one comes out, an extra probably inch at least before it bends, and it was hitting the bracket for the well, this whole bracket right here. And so I had to put a little bend in it right there, which it put just a tiny little kink in it because I had to do it with channel, or not channel locks. Couldn't get my bender on there because it's just such a tight area right there in the nut. Tried to do it the bender and ended up just putting some vice grips on it, and I mean I say it kinked. It put a dent in it. It didn't kink it. It put a little dent. So and then I just kind of bent it up to give it a little ramp up to clear that. And now we've got, well, you can't really tell, we've got a gap. So that worked out well. It actually gets closer the more you go. Yeah, I think we gain clearance going this way. Yeah, we do. So that's good. Let's see, this was, yeah, you can see this was the original one. You can see how much that one goes out before that 90, and this one, it's just almost immediate. So that was our issue. I've got to get some low pressure return line, power steering or transmission cooler line. Either one would be good. And yeah, so that's, like I said, that's where we're going to leave this. We've got those two lines there that still need to get hooked up. And thinking this through real quick. If there's anything else I need to do today, I don't think so. We're gonna call it quits. So we'll continue this next week and hopefully get it all wrapped up and all back together. Still got some decisions to be made on the exhaust, so I'm gonna be thinking about that, order some parts. Hopefully we'll have that for next week. Muffler, exhaust pipe, whatever we need for that, and so we can get that all buttoned up and get this thing closer to running. So thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below, hit the like button, and subscribe for more.